Greetings and welcome to the Dream Syndicate. In today's video, I'm going to be crafting a Brambling and showing you how to sculpt a fantasy creature head. So let's get crafting. If you want to join me in making imaginary reality, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. This sketch of the Brambling has lived in my sketchbook for a little bit, so I thought it was cool enough that I wanted to sit down and make an art doll from it. We'll start things off with taking a wad of tinfoil and making it into a nice round shape for the head. Next, I'm going to warm up some Sculpt firm by working it around, and then I'm going to build up that tinfoil shape that we had for our Brambling. I'm going to go back and add a little bit more mass to the Brambling's chin. I just want it to be a little bit more full on the bottom. Next, we're going to add in these holes here that are going to give us an indication of where the eyes are going to go. Then we'll place this little guy's mouth. And there we have the basic form of our head sculpt. I think I wanted to have even more of a lower jaw, so I'm going to go ahead and add that in now. Before I started working on the head form, I made these twisted pieces of wire that ended up looking like branch forms that I'm going to later install into the head. I'm winding pieces of wire together so this way you have varied thicknesses of the branches as they form, and then I'll create gentle arcs and slopes that mimic what a tree branch might look like. Now it's time to plunge these pieces of wire into our Brambling's head and start to give him some tree branch antlers. As I go and I'm putting these wire pieces in, I'm also going to put a thin layer of clay over top of it because I'm going to sculpt over top of that. So at first they go on really rough and it's going to be kind of bumpy, and I'll go about refining that as I keep working the sculpture. This was my first time using Sculpt firm. I usually use the Super Sculpt, the beige stuff, and honestly I thought Sculpt firm was going to be a lot firmer. I didn't really notice a big difference between the two. And I think if I were to do something like this again, I would try if there's another firmer variety of Sculpt, or even Monster Clay, which is an epoxy-based clay that actually air hardens as opposed to baking it in the oven. Well, I think the branches will hold up well if they were just sitting on a shelf at my house. If I had to ship the sculpture somewhere, I'd be worried that they would absolutely break on the way. And that's why I would want to use a denser clay like a Monster Clay. I'm just going to add a bit more clay to help hold this in place, and then smooth it on down with a clay tool. It appears I'm kind of obsessed with adding to this character's jawline because I'm at it again. Next, I'm going to give the art doll a bit of a nose ridge. He's not going to have a full-on protruding nose, but it's just going to be this little bump that gets the idea across. Here we're just defining a lower lip and the inside of the mouth. I want this character's cheeks to have a sort of jagged, angular quality, so I'm adding these sort of side flanges here. There was a part of the branches that seemed like they were a little too thin, so I patched in a little bit of clay over top of there. Now we'll take a strip of clay and work at giving him a nice heavy brow ridge. Next, I'm going to create these vertical lines that start to give the Brambling this feeling that it looks like it's made out of bark. As you create art, it's a good thing to get to a place where at some point you have a healthy bit of disdain for your own work, in that you're just not precious about anything. You don't worry about what you're doing, you're just going to do the best thing that you know how to do at the time. So in that way, I had no problem with cutting out the neck of this thing, because at first I thought it was going to be a really thin neck, but I decided it's going to be a little bulkier than that. Here I'm taking some plumber's epoxy and I'm going to work it up and then turn it into tiny little teeth. So I ended up making like a dozen of these things, really only ended up using like 4, but I wanted to have options to choose from. Now I'll take my clay tool and puncture little holes, little divots that I can put the teeth into, and then just keep repeating that process as I add the teeth in. Next, we're going to give our art doll some ears. He's going to have these nice pointy form ears on the sides here. We're going to spend some time sort of smoothing over the clay and making sure the ears are firmly attached like this. And then spending a little bit of time putting in that ear indentation or furrow where sound would funnel to. And then I'll spend a ton more time adding more of that bark-like texture. I'd have to say that about half the time working on this sculpture was just making sure the texture looked good and it was all over the figure. Now to one of my favorite parts, giving them eyes. It always feels like the sculpting process builds up to this one moment where you can give it the eyes and have it look at you. I guess if you have one of those phobias where you're afraid of dolls or something, probably not the best thing, but for me, I enjoy it. Now I'm just placing the form of the lower eyelids that sort of cup and cradle the eye. The lower eyelid is then overlapped by the upper eyelid, so I'll put that in and smooth it around and have it work around the eye. Now instead of being obsessed with giving him a bigger lower jaw, I'm now doing the same thing with his brow ridge. We'll carry some of that texturing through to the creature's lips as well. Now to add just some last minute details to the tips of the branches. I'd usually be able to finish a Sculpey sculpture in the oven, but because these branches are so delicate, I had to resort to using my heat gun, which is not a very efficient way to do things. I spent a good 10-15 minutes slowly turning the sculpture in my hand and directing the heat gun around it, and then when it was firm enough, I drilled a hole in the bottom and was able to mount it so that I could just slowly turn it on a Lazy Susan, and after another round of baking, it was finally done. Thanks so much for watching. If you want to join me making imaginary reality, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. Until next time, make believe!